Hi, and thanks for listening to my talk. Let me introduce myself. I'm an application architect at Calendly, where I focus on the product's integrations and API. I'm passionate about web apps, user experience, teamwork, productivity, and personal growth. And today I'm happy to be sharing some tips that will serve you in your professional journey. Let's talk about job search. The job search process can be frustrating. It's stressful, time-consuming, unpredictable. The recruiting process just isn't very transparent to the job seeker. It's also hard to compare your opportunities objectively because every company is different. Lastly, negotiating is hard. You often feel like you have no power to negotiate. Over the years, I got better at overcoming these challenges, and I'm going to talk about how in this presentation. To set your expectations, what this talk is about is being organized as a job seeker, performing thorough research, being prepared, and being in control. I'm not going to talk about technical skills, interview question, resume building, and topics like that. Here's the things that we'll go over. Setting your goals, gathering information, organizing your job hunt, controlling the interview process, and communicating efficiently. We'll also talk about handling rejection because that's an inevitable part of every job hunt. Now, let's start. Rather than jumping straight onto job boards and trying to fit yourself into someone else's boxes, you should first think about your own goals and aspirations. Ask yourself these questions. What are you good at now? What would you like to focus on improving in the near future? What are the past projects you have enjoyed and why? What would you rather not do again? I think it's a very beneficial thing that we all don't do enough. We get so busy in our current jobs that we don't take the time to reflect on our professional experience and to strategize on the next steps. Our goal here is to arrive at a vision of an ideal job and develop some criteria that we could use in our search. And it's okay to change your answer later, but challenge yourself to think about these things now. If you need some more guidance, AngelList, one of my favorite platforms for startup jobs, actually has a culture fit questionnaire that they prompt you to fill out when you create your profile. So definitely check this out. Now, compile your answers to the earlier questions into a one-paragraph statement and save it somewhere. Use it as a guide to evaluate your opportunities. Include the things that matter to you, of course, because this example just I made up, and the things that matter to you may be very different. Now, over the years, I've developed my own process for doing research, and I'd like to share it with you. Develop a list of facts that you'd like to find out for every company. I call it the company info sheet, and here's my example. As you see, I try to look at each company in multiple dimensions, because there are many important aspects beyond just technology. Being organized will help you gather full information on all companies and make it easier to compare them. So make a template and then fill it out like a bingo card. Try to get as much information as possible from public sources and leave the blanks when you get a chance to talk to someone at the company. Now, first we need to discover what's out there. Here are the places where I look at for jobs. AngelList, as I mentioned, my favorite place for startup jobs, from small companies with just a few people to growth stage startups with hundreds of employees. It's very convenient to use, has flexible filters, and one of the things that I like about it, the salary and equity range is often posted. Glassdoor, you may be familiar with it. It has a broader set of companies and jobs than AngelList, but it still, in my opinion, has less noise than the traditional platforms like Indeed or Dice. Stack Overflow jobs, everyone knows about Stack Overflow, the question and answer site, but not everyone knows that they have a job board, and in fact it's very good and convenient to use. Very clean UI, also good filters. Unfortunately, at least in my experience, I haven't found as many results on the platform, just not as many employers seem to be using it. But nevertheless, because I like the experience and because I like Stack Overflow, I thought I'd include it. Now, you may have come across or deliberately searched one of those best places to work or fastest growing startups or something like that list. And some of these companies may not be actively hiring, but you still want to know about them. I would go through one of these lists, filtered by industry, and then go to their websites directly. Sometimes a company would even have a catch-all job posting where you can just reach out even if they don't have a particular role open. That can be a good channel for communication. Lastly, meetups are a great way to connect with other professionals in an informal environment. Many include job announcements at the beginning or the end of the event. And make sure to set up job alerts. Now, here are the sources that I use to collect information on a company. I look at the company website, and here are the aspects that I pay attention to in particular. The design and how recent it is, the clarity of the message. When you go to the homepage, can you immediately tell what the company and the product are about? If there's a demo and it's easy to demo the product, I encourage you to do it because the product is often a good reflection of the company, how it's built, even the company culture. Who are the major customers? Is there a page about leadership and the story of the company? Often, especially more recently, I've seen companies dedicate more attention to their culture page. They describe it, their cultural value. Many companies have values. And for a tech company, I think it's a very good sign if they have a tech blog. Now, this was a lot of criteria, but not everything is quantifiable. Just take a moment to note your overall impression of the website. Here's some other sources that I look at. Now, you're probably familiar with Glassdoor. It's famous for its employee reviews, salary ranges, and reports of interview experience. Many companies also upload photos of their office life, which is a nice way to get a sneak peek into how their office actually works, or maybe if they're a remote company, they may still do in-person meetups, company retreats, so that information can be useful. Comparably is a more recent competitor to Glassdoor. It focuses specifically on company culture, and it tries to only keep reviews by current employees so that the information on the website reflects what it's like to work there today. Crunchbase is my go-to resource for easy-to-digest facts without the marketing fluff. You can scan through basic information about the company, its size, industry, headquarters. Also, the funding information may help you determine the maturity stage of the company and the level of risk that you would be taking if you join them. Owler is similar to Crunchbase, but it also shows competitors an estimated revenue. Sometimes one site or the other would have more information about a particular company, so I would check out both. I don't have to tell you what LinkedIn is, but I'll show you how I use it in my company research. The most valuable thing that I think you can learn at LinkedIn is the employees. And there's actually a whole lot that you can learn by looking at who works at a company. For example, you can learn the overall role makeup of the company. For instance, if there are more salespeople than engineers, then it's safe to say that it's a sales-driven organization. If for the role you're looking for, what levels do you see? Do you just see an engineer or senior engineer, if that's the role you're looking for, or there are more levels? The number of levels may speak about how developed their career matrix is. If you see interns and junior engineers, this can mean that the company invests in career development. So you've collected this information from public sources, but let's dive deeper. What if you could learn from an actual employee of the company? And LinkedIn is here to help. Since many employees keep their LinkedIn profiles, we can try to reach out to them. Now, I know that reaching out to a stranger sounds scary, but I've done this myself a number of times, and I promise it works. And I'll show you how to do it in a completely professional, non-awkward manner. First, to increase our chances of getting a response, let's find someone with a good-looking profile. What I mean by that is they've completed their profile details, they have many connections, and you can see activity on LinkedIn. This means they actually checked their LinkedIn profile. And by the way, brush up your profile too, if you haven't already, so that you appear in your best light. Here's an example of a message I would write, and feel free to use it as is. Keep it short and on point. And by the way, you don't need to use LinkedIn Premium. You can send these connect messages to most people, and you don't need LinkedIn Premium. Of course, not everyone will respond, but keep trying. Now, hopefully you'll get some responses, and it's time to set up the call. If you're not sure how to start the call, here's what I recommend. First of all, thank them for jumping on a call with you. They don't have to do this, they're doing you a favor. Quickly introduce yourself, keep it under a minute, and try to insert some detail that you may have learned from their profile. It just helps make a personal connection. And if you need, practice this with a friend. And during the call, remember that you're doing research at this point. This is not an interview. Don't treat it like an interview. Don't ask for interview questions. Don't ask to evaluate you as a candidate. You don't want to come across as someone who's desperate to get their foot in the door by any means. Do give your quick introduction, ask about the company, that person's daily work, and respect their time. If you book 20 minutes, stay on time. And this is how I would end the call. Thank them one more time, and I think it's appropriate to include or mention if there's a referral process that they would like to use. When you phrase it this way, you still give them the choice of not referring you if they're not comfortable. There are many benefits of doing that. You get the opportunity to ask a lot of questions from a person in an informal setting, and it's informal for both of you. There's no pressure of a formal interview for you or for them. You get the time to digest all that information before starting the formal interview process. And there's already a face that you know at the company, and I think it's comforting. Now, here's some good questions to ask during that call or later when you actually do the interviews. I'm not going to read this list, and I'll make these slides available, but the general advice here is try to go beyond the general questions about the company. Also learn about their personal experience, how they got there, where they were before, what do they enjoy about their job today, what would they like to see improved, etc. And here's some more questions. These focus more on the technology and processes and the career development at the company. One that I particularly like is what makes an engineer or whatever role you're interested in at a company successful. You might get very interesting, insightful results that talk about the culture, but also about their formal role expectations. Now, this was a long list of questions, and I believe all that information helps, but you don't have to be too formal, because you're not preparing a report for someone. So just remember that the ultimate question that you're trying to answer is, how much do I want to work there? And companies can be very different, so simply because someone doesn't follow a certain process or use a certain technology doesn't necessarily mean that they're inferior. What's more insightful are the patterns that might emerge as you put together various pieces of knowledge that you collected. Now, you will be collecting a lot of information and start interviewing with multiple companies. It helps a lot to stay organized so that you don't mix things up and don't lose anything. I'm personally a big fan of Trello, and I found that it's a fantastic tool for organizing your job search. This screenshot is actually a screenshot of an actual board that I used back a couple years ago when I was looking for a job. And what I do is as I research companies, I learn about them, I will put the companies that I'm interested in the first column, and then as I apply and go along the process with them, I move the columns to the right. Remember that company info sheet that I mentioned? You can put all that information in the description of a Trello card. Now, you'll also likely have a custom cover letter or maybe a resume when applying to each company. I like to also attach these to the card along with any notes from calls and interviews so that everything's in one place. What I also like to do is add a comment to the card each time I interact with the company. That way I can keep track of the timeline from the moment I applied. Now let's talk about getting more control over the interview process. When you apply to multiple companies, make it your objective to keep the progress with them in sync. Why this matters? Because you want to have multiple offers lined up. which gives you more power to negotiate. And then you can actually compare multiple opportunities without risking of losing them. If you apply to companies one at a time, chances are, if you get the offers, you'll have to consider your offers one at a time, where you get an offer, but you're still in the early stage with another company, and you either take the offer that you have or risk not getting anything. So it's always a good idea to line the offers up. And while you don't have all the power here, the company ultimately owns the process. You do have control over a few things. For instance, you have control over when you apply. So try to research a bunch of companies together and then apply at the same time. Now, there are many delays in the recruiting process at every stage, basically, but the part that you do control is how quickly you respond when the ball is in your court. And by the way, learn what the steps are with each company. Often the recruiter would mention it to you, but if not, do make sure to find out during probably that first initial phone screen. Also, just being prepared and knowing what to expect helps you stay in control, stay focused, and gives you an advantage. Here's also a few tips on communicating efficiently throughout this whole process. First, be very responsive and easy to work with. By staying in touch with a potential employer, you're reminding them of yourself and showing that you're ready to move the ball forward. I've had cases where I would start the process, maybe submit something, and then somehow my file just gets lost, my email goes to the wrong folder. So if you don't hear back, follow up 1 to 3 days after they said they would respond. If you anticipate a delay on your end, maybe you're going to be out of town, or you just have a lot of work and need an extra few days to return an assignment, communicate that. Everybody understands that things come up. You have your day job most likely. It's better to over-communicate than under-communicate. And take every opportunity to ask questions. If you follow my advice, you will have a lot of questions you'll want to find out. Every time you talk to someone or send them an email, that's an opportunity to ask questions. And lastly, be patient. I know the waiting can be anxiety-provoking, but just do what is in your power and then move on to other tasks. During the interview, take lots of notes. I didn't do this early on and I regretted it. Don't rely on memory. You'll really find the notes useful later. You might think you remember things, but it all becomes a blur just after a couple of interviews. Notes can also help make things more objective. Also, write down the names of people who interview you so that you can look them up on LinkedIn later. Learn their personal stories. Recall some of the questions that I mentioned. The questions like, where were you before? How did you decide to join this company? What do you like? What are your goals? Those are the questions you can ask over and over to every person that you meet during the interviews. So you'll never run out of questions that way, and you'll keep filling in the details to build as complete of a picture of a company and the people who work there as possible. And while you will ask a lot of technical questions, it's important to get to know the people who work there, because this is who you will be working with. Also, a very important thing to remember, it's not only the company choosing you, but you're choosing them too. Interview is a two-way street. Even if you're fresh out of school or a boot camp, you're still a professional offering your talent. Having this mindset will give you some confidence. But rejection, as I mentioned, it's an inevitable part of the process. It never feels great, but the key here is to not think of it as a personal failure. First, it isn't always about your skills. Sometimes a company needs to fill a very specific role, and you just may not be the best match based on those specific criteria. But also, think about all the things that you've acquired throughout this whole process, throughout this journey. You gain some insider knowledge about the company. You learn more about the technical problems they solve, the culture, ways of doing things. You've expanded your horizon and now have more impressions to compare your future experiences against. You improved your interviewing skills. Of course, you can read books on interviewing and practice problems, but you really only get better by doing it. And perhaps most importantly, you made connections with individuals at that company. You expanded your network. Maybe you'll run into them at conferences or meetups or even a future job. Who knows? Maybe you'll refer them or they'll refer you. So to summarize, interviewing is never an all or nothing game. And I'll leave you with this quote that I really love by Kim Liao. Now I see rejection as a conversation. For every piece that is rejected, at least one person read it, thought about it, and really considered whether it would be a good fit for a publication. Since I've started aiming for rejections, not acceptances, I no longer dread submitting. I think it applies just as well to any professional field, including ours. So just to recap, be intentional about your interviewing process. Do your thorough research, stay organized, keep communication alive and open, and remember that interviewing goes both ways. Thank you for watching. I am really curious about your feedback and questions. I know I may have brushed through a lot of topics. If there's something you'd like me to expand on, feel free to message me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very responsive, and thank you for watching.